So the sound library is going to be your absolute best friend when it comes to doing any kind of sound design work. This little area here basically allows us to search for our sound effects and access them much faster than having to import them each time into the media pool. The sound library basically allows us to connect to a folder anywhere on our desktop or external drive and access all of those sound effects connected to that folder or library and be able to very quickly search for any sound effects right here. So for example, I can type in cat, and down below it will show me all of my sound effects that have the word cat in them. Now on my system, I have a folder that contains all of my sound effects that I've collected over the past decade. So there's tons and tons of audio files on there. But right now we are actually not searching through that library. Right now we are connected to the Fairlight sound library. If I click this little button over here in the top right, it shows what catalog of sounds we are searching through right now. Now the thing that we need to understand about the sound library is it uses the DaVinci database structure. So if I click this drop down over here, it basically allows me to select what database it is that I want to be pulling the sound library information from. So for example, if we head over here to Sardine Run, this is another project that I was working on, we could see that there's nothing here. And that's because within that database, I never actually added a library. So that sound library from the Sardine Run database is kind of useless to me right now because I never actually connected any library to that database. Now, the reason we would want to switch between different databases like this is because the sound library should, in theory, look different for different types of projects, right? So if you're working on maybe YouTube videos and you have a YouTube video database, that sound library might look a lot different than maybe a more cinematic database. Because we are able to curate different sound libraries in different databases, we are able to choose what sound library we want to work with by using the database structure of DaVinci. So knowing that, what we can do is actually just hit Shift-1, and what we can do is create a new database. So I'm going to call this one Sound Effects. And this is the database that I'm going to be using to catalog all of my sound effects. And I'll be able to access this database over here in this dropdown once we've done that. So I'm going to call this sound effects. We're going to choose a location, and I've navigated to my sound effects folder over here. So this one sound effects folder basically has a bunch of other folders in it that have all of the sound effects that I've collected over the years. So next to this sound effects folder, I'm just going to create a new folder. So I'm going to go down here, new folder, and I'll call this DaVinci Sound Effects Database. And that's just going to stay there. So I'm going to click open. Let's create that now and give it a second. It's going to create a new database. And now we don't actually have to do anything within the sound effects database. So let's go back to our original project file over here. And now what I can do is click this drop down. We can go to sound effects. So right there. And we can see that there's no library connected. So we have to add a library. So what I'm going to do is add that same folder, that sound effects folder. So I have the sound effects and I have the DaVinci sound effects database. So I'm just going to select the sound effects folder here. And because there's a ton of other folders within this folder, it's going to dig into all of those and catalog every single MP3 or WAV file, every single audio file that is within any of the folders within this folder. So let's open this up. And it's going to take a little while. So as you can see, I have 17,872 clips. So right now it's scanning all of these different sounds so it can get the waveform data and any other data that the sound library needs. So this is going to take a little while, but this is something that you only need to do once. Once DaVinci has done the scanning process once, then it's not going to have to do it again unless you add another library again in the future. And now once that's complete, I can head over here to the search and search for anything within all of my sound effects. So I can type in whoosh, and just like that, it's going to show me all of my whoosh sound effects down here in all of my folders. So as you can see, there's a ton of them here. So it would be advantageous for me to go through a couple of these. And whenever I find one that I really like, what I'm going to want to do is rate it here. So I'd want to give it a rating. So we can see that we have 5 stars. So it gives us some flexibility as to how we want to rate things. If sounds are not too great, we can give them a 1. And then the better sounds, we can give them 5 stars. And that way we can just get a quicker visual of what sounds are better than others. So obviously, if we want to preview any one of these sounds, we can just double click on it and it will start to play up here in this little timeline. I'm just going to unmute DaVinci right now so we can hear this. Cool. So that's an awesome sounding whoosh. And now we have a couple different options as to how we can add this into our timeline. The first thing we could do is just simply click on it and drag it in. We can drag it into any one of our tracks over here. But there's another way that I like to do this as well. So with a track selected, so I'll select my sound effects track over here. What I'll do is navigate to the point in my timeline where I would like to add this whoosh. So let's say, I don't know, maybe over here. And wherever the playhead sits, I can audition this clip and it will basically bring this clip into the timeline on the selected track of where the playhead is. Now, the cool thing about Audition is we can also set sync points over here on our sound effects. So a lot of the time, sound effects will have some empty space at the beginning or the end. So you don't necessarily want to place the sound effect at the very beginning of the clip. You might want to go a little bit further in, and this button right here allows us to set sync points. So if I select this button over here at the very start of the waveform, we can see in this waveform preview, there's this little green line over here, and that just shows us the sync point that we've selected. So this is some metadata that is being stored within this catalog, and this is important because these sync points can save us a lot of time in the future. Now, if I click Audition, we can see that the clip has been added into the timeline over here, and we can go back with the playhead, press play, and sample this to see what it sounds like. I'm just going to dim it so it's not too loud. So sound effect is pretty quiet. We're also going to have to lower the volume of the song here. So why don't we solo this? That works pretty well. Cool. So that's just a good example. And if we like the way that this clip has been positioned in our timeline, what we can do is select confirm over here in the sound library. When we click confirm, it adds that clip to the timeline. The other option is just to press cancel. And when we press cancel, it's just going to remove it from the timeline. So Audition is kind of like we're auditioning the sound. We're not 100% sure if we want to use that sound, but auditioning basically allows us to like give it a trial run. So we can put it in the timeline temporarily, play around with it. If we like it, we can click confirm. If we don't, we can click cancel. So let's find another example here. So we can see this clip. It's got a lot of empty space at the beginning here. So I would want to set the sync point to probably about here. Let's go to a different point in our timeline. This might not be the best example, but maybe this sound effect could work somewhere like here, and we can audition it and it will add it to the selected track. And we can see that it's added the sync point to where the playhead sits, not the start of the clip. So that is pretty huge and is something that I definitely recommend you utilize. Utilize those sync points because they're going to help you save time by not having to reposition your clips. It will just place that sync point exactly where the playhead is. If we play with the EQ and stuff of this sound, we could potentially make it sound as though that is a skateboard. But this is just an example here. So remember, I have to click confirm. This sound doesn't sound too great, so what I'm going to do is click cancel, and we can see that it's removed it from that place. So that's pretty much everything we need to know about the sound library. It's a very powerful tool. Definitely recommend you implement it into your sound design workflow because it is going to save you a lot of time and just make this overall process a lot more fun. That's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I'll catch you in the next one.